The 2,700-foot-tall Burj Khalifa shocked the engineering world when it was unveiled in 2010. Now, Saudi Arabia is working to build a skyscraper that is twice as tall, a whopping 2 kilometers. But is such a feat even possible? Let's explore. A tower to rival them all. A 2,000-meter-high building sounds impressive enough without comparing the new tower concept to existing buildings. When one does, it finally becomes clear just how audacious this plan truly is. For instance, One World Trade Center, the tallest building in the US, is 541 meters high. Meanwhile, the tallest building in the world, Dubai's Burj Khalifa, is 828 meters high. So, to say Saudi Arabia's new tower will be twice the size of the UAE's crown jewel is to leave out around 344 meters, or one Eiffel Tower. Yet each of these buildings represents a monumental achievement in its own right. It begs the question, how can the Saudis expect to build something so tall without encountering problems? Since the announcement on March 4th, the project will be built to the north of the Saudi capital of Riyadh and will be handled by Foster & Partners, a world-renowned firm that has already overseen several major projects in Saudi Arabia. Among these was a massive renovation of the Riyadh airport and the construction of the Al Faisaliya Tower. But Foster & Partners has never built anything close to this height. This is surprising, considering that they were chosen for the job over Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, the architectural masterminds behind the Burj Khalifa. And it's not surprising that so many major architectural firms threw their hats into the ring as soon as this new 2-kilometer tower was announced. Depending on the source, the tower will cost anywhere from $5 billion to $15 billion, a hefty chunk of change for even the famously deep-pocketed Saudi government. So, is it feasible? Technically, a government can achieve anything if it has enough money to throw at the problem. However, there are a number of significant challenges involved in building any tower, let alone one that reaches 1/7 of the way to the stratosphere. Problems the tower will face. When you're building something this tall, the biggest problem is always going to be the wind. Though many tall buildings appear to be static, they are actually swaying slightly. Of course, it's only slight if you're standing outside or on a lower floor. Given the insane height, those at the top of the new tower could end up feeling like they were on a boat in the North Sea. Architects, of course, account for this in their designs and in the types of materials they use. Concrete, for instance, provides a lot of weight and helps dampen the effects of a strong breeze. For this reason, many experts theorize that the new tower will use high-strength concrete, integrated steel framing, and shear walls to prevent sway. It will also likely boast a smooth, sloped exterior design which would provide superior aerodynamic performance. Another challenge will have to do with moving up and down the tower. Traditional elevators are limited by the length and weight of the cables. As buildings grow taller, the cables become heavier and longer, making it impractical and unsafe for elevators to travel directly from the ground to the top floors. On top of that, even the best residential elevators tend to have a top speed of around 1.8 kilometers per hour. That means it would take a whopping 1 hour and 7 minutes to go from the ground floor of the new tower to the top. Commercial elevators can move a bit faster, sometimes up to 9 kilometers per hour. That's much better, but it's still 13 minutes in a cramped box with a bunch of strangers. The solution? High-speed elevators, which could theoretically get someone from the bottom of the tower to the top in a few minutes, if they can deal with the discomfort. You see, most of the people who will be traveling up and down the 2-kilometer tower won't be trained astronauts or fighter pilots. That's a problem because moving vertically at high speeds is not easy on the body, especially at higher elevations. For most people, the physical effects of high altitude, such as reduced physical performance and increased breathing rate, begin to be noticeable at elevations above 1,500 meters. Anyone who has ever flown from the flat East Coast to Colorado can tell you that the altitude takes some adjustment. If you lived high in the tower, simply going down to get lunch and returning to your 140-plus floor apartment could lead to headaches, fatigue, and other symptoms. This means people visiting the tower will be at risk of becoming pretty ill on the ride up and down, which will certainly cut into their enjoyment of the experience. But there's even more to the elevator problem. After all, the fact that travel times will be so long means that the new tower will need lots more elevators to serve the constant flow of tourists, residents, and workers. This will be a mixed-use building, after all, so there will be lots of people coming and going at all times. However, a large number of elevators would take up a lot of the building's core space. Right now, the main concept in place to solve these issues is to install what are known as sky lobbies, transfer points where passengers can move between different elevator banks. This would give travelers time to adjust to the elevation on their way up and down and ensure more efficient movement of people without the need for dozens of separate elevators. But will it be convenient? If people are living and working in the building, they will need to travel the massive structure multiple times a day. Having to stop at a sky lobby for an indeterminate amount of time every few dozen floors will get very old very fast. Saudi Arabia's mega project track record. Whatever the problems would be, there's no denying that a 2,000-meter tall tower would be an incredible tourist draw, and this is precisely what Saudi Arabia is looking for. In recent years, its leaders, namely King Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud, have decided to transform large parts of the country's landscape into futuristic cityscapes, aiming to get in on those sweet tourism dollars. After all, some of the largest oil-buying nations are now investing billions in renewable energy. If Saudi Arabia wants to diversify its one-note economy, it needs to start now. Of course, the country has kept a close eye on its neighbor, the United Arab Emirates, having witnessed Dubai's transformation from a fishing village to a tourism magnet. One of the driving forces of this has been the Burj Khalifa. While the project cost $1.5 billion, it brings in half of that in tourist money alone each year, not counting rent from tenants and other forms of income. The way the Saudis see it, why not build an even taller building? It makes sense, unless of course you consider Saudi Arabia has a pretty poor track record when it comes to these sorts of mega projects. In fact, the tower isn't even the most ambitious construction project going on within the country right now. That title has to go to NEOM. Part of Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030, which aims to diversify the economy away from fossil fuels by enhancing the tourism sector, NEOM is a $1.5 trillion project to build ultra-futuristic resort destinations in and around the Gulf of Aqaba. The first of these future destinations was to be The Line, a $500 billion, 110-mile-long strip of enclosed city with no cars, streets, or carbon emissions. Upon its announcement, the line was expected to accommodate 9 million people, the same population as Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, or Bangkok, Thailand. The line would run completely on renewable electricity and feature only the finest amenities for its residents. At least, that was the plan. In early 2024, those plans changed dramatically. Though it was originally planned to be fully completed and housing at least 1.5 million people by 2030, planners now say the line will only boast around 300,000 inhabitants by that year. And rather than stretch a full 110 miles, the city would measure a much more realistic 1.5 miles. It seems the complexity of the project, coupled with a growing number of financial issues, have led to serious delays, with contractors pulling their workers from the site. But a failure is a failure, no matter the reason. But there's more. Some people might recognize that this new 2-kilometer tall tower isn't the first time Saudi Arabia tried to outdo the Burj Khalifa. Back in 2013, the government decided to build a similar tower in the northern port city of Jeddah. At the time, the tower was envisioned as the centerpiece of the Jeddah Economic City project. This 3-phase development plan, which is still ongoing, aims to create an entire business and tourism district, one that will rival anything to be found in the east or west. Jeddah Tower will be a staggering 1,008 meters tall, 180 meters taller than the Burj Khalifa, and will feature the world's highest observation deck. The only problem is that after 11 years of construction, there's no tower, just a shell of base standing around 300 meters tall. It's not surprising that people have started comparing the tower to the famously unfinished Rungyong Hotel or the new South China Mall, assessments that are sure to irk King Salman and the other leaders. In fact, the project has been mired in labor problems, funding issues, and more, with construction just restarting again after a 5-year lull. As of right now, there's no timeline for completion. And to make matters worse, other Saudi revitalization projects are facing similar problems. But the reason the Jeddah Tower's fate is so directly tied with criticisms of the new project is that the new former's completion isn't on hold because of logistics, but a lack of funds. Clearly, the costs for labor and building materials were already expected to be immense, but inflation has taken those costs to a whole new level. The taller a building is, the more the cost per square foot goes up. Moreover, the taller it is, the longer it takes to build. This means longer contracts with higher payrolls and typically more costly delays. There's no denying that Saudi Arabia has a near endless amount of ambition, but it does not have an endless amount of money. That's why the line project was scaled down. That's why Jeddah Tower is still sitting unfinished and empty. So when the Saudis say they're going to go bigger, better, and more expensive, there are reasons to be skeptical.